Hi guys, welcome to the hobby desk. So today I am making a chaos gate, as you can see here. So it's from household materials and it's relatively inexpensive. Hopefully you'll pick up a few tips. Even if you don't make a chaos gate, these tips apply to other terrain projects. Right, let's get to it, shall we? So what do we need for this project? Well, I recommend chipboard as thin as you can. Or extremely thick non-corrugated cardboard, because we'll be using a lot of PVA glue, and PVA glue, when it dries, it shrinks and it'll start to curl. So you don't want warpage on your base. So I've got a good bit of, probably a bit too overkill, a bit too thick, and I've beveled the edges because I don't want anything to look too obvious. It's not a tile for a city, so it probably shouldn't have straight edges, so I might have to deal with that, make it look a bit more wonky, because I'm going to put this fairly large piece in the middle of the table. It's going to be, it's not an objective necessarily, but I want it to look fairly menacing. You know, it's a chaos gate. It's going to look fairly empowering in the center of the table. So it's going to be a fairly large base for what I want, and some polystyrene. So this isn't regular polystyrene, this is extruded foam type of polystyrene, not the ball type of polystyrene. Now that's just my personal preference, because I want this to look like it's been blown up a little bit, chipped a little bit, and that's fine if you use polystyrene, like regular old household polystyrene, because after all, I always like to use household materials to keep the cost down, and this project is no exception to that. This stuff, not so easy to come by unless you know a builder, or you want to buy massive sheets of it, because generally it's like 8-foot size boards, which is great. It is fantastic stuff. If you ever need to make a proper gaming table, this stuff's brilliant, because you can sand it, you can cut it easily. You don't need a hot wire cutter, you can use a regular old knife. Whereas polystyrene, it's better with a hot knife because the balls will go everywhere. Yeah, there's a joke there somewhere. That's fine if you want to use that, that's totally okay, but me personally, I'm using this insulation board that you get in just everyday modern builds. It's between the breeze blocks. It comes different names, different companies made it, like Celotex, things like that. And if you're over the pond, if you're in the States, you might find you'll have blue rather than yellow, or even pink. That stuff is actually better. It's less dusty when you sand it, less likely to chip. This stuff is fairly durable. It's better than polystyrene. Once polystyrene breaks, you know, you can't repair it. Can't use super glue or anything like that. This stuff is slightly more durable, because I will be taking it to my local clubs. Taking it to local clubs. Hopefully one day when all this COVID stuff's over. So I want it to be fairly durable, because I'm going to be putting it in boxes and things like that, moving it around. It's going to be in the back of the car. It's fine if it's going to be a diorama or something, but I want it to be a bit more durable. So that's what I'll do, because I like things to last. So I'm using this stuff, and like I said, you'll need a knife. So it's more than an inch thickness, so I'm going to be using a long bladed knife. So like I said, cheap, horrible knife. Only use it for terrain. And I have a pack of 6 for £1. So even if you're cutting polystyrene, you'll find that knives will eventually go blunt, because it just kills it. I know it squeaks like you're cutting into a dolphin, but it also dulls your blade as well. I don't recommend cutting into any animals, honestly. So this stuff, I'm going to cut fairly easy. It's not as bad as polystyrene, and it's less messy. So pack of 6 for £1, can't really beat it. So it doesn't matter if that only lasts for this project. There you go, relatively inexpensive. What else I'll have for this project? I'm going to use Citadel skulls. A nice box. Contains loads of skulls. Human skulls, demon skulls, orc skulls, Tau skulls, because you've got to kill those Tau, right? It's going to litter the base, and this is going to be a chaos gate. You know, it's going to have skulls everywhere. It's not going to be friendly. So that's what I'm going to aim for. I might even use a few fine chains as well, from like old jewellery chains, things like that, that you might get at, you know, the bargain bin of a charity shop or something. Broken up necklaces, things like that are wicked for this kind of thing. I don't recommend breaking up your mum's best jewellery, so do not do that. And I'm just going to litter the base with rocks and pieces of cork and things like that, just to build the base up a little bit, because I want this gate to be ancient. It's going to be a ruined gate, and it's going to have been there for thousands of years. That's the idea I've got. Whether or not I'll stick to it or not is another thing, because you know me. I always change my mind. So I'll start off with the foam. So the foam, I've gently marked it out. I don't try to use pencil on this stuff because it's so soft. As soon as you use a sharp pencil on it, you've already put indentations on it. So that's the kind of size I want to go with. I want to go roughly just over an inch thickness, because I want this thing to have some girth to it. You know, it's been around for a while. So, like I said, I want it to be roughly an inch thick, and slightly bigger than an inch. So if you've got a compass, brilliant. So gently mark it with a soft pen. Wouldn't recommend a pencil, but if you have to, you have to. So there you go, because you can always sand this stuff. It's so good. I mean, it's pretty soft. You can see on the side. Like I said, if you've got the bluer stuff, it is better, less likely to chip or anything. But it is great. You can easily cut it. You can just use a bit of sandpaper to clean it up afterwards, which is nice. So I've marked it up, just a bit approximate. It's nothing too fancy. So I'm going to imagine there's going to be loads of rocks and rubble and things like that. So it's going to be roughly like this. So I've got just over half of a gate there, and whatever's left over I will add a little bit more to, maybe a bit sticking out the ground where this has been blown up at some stage. Some loyalist troops of the Imperium have blown it up, possibly. Stop these demons from spawning in. Right, and next thing I recommend is a bit of cardboard, so you can mark out a nice template for the points on the 8-pointed star. After all, this is a chaos gate, so it's going to have 8 points to it. So imagine a compass. You got north, south, east and west. So you're going to have little points there, one at the bottom, there and there, and then there's one in between. That's the 8-pointed star of chaos, for those who don't know. Like this. Okay, so that's basically what I'm aiming for. So get a bit of cardboard, and here, light blue Peter, I've cut one out already. That's roughly where I want it to be. So I'm going to put one there like that. I'm going to draw around my soft felt tip pen. And then later on, when I cut this out, I will have enough here to stick on a couple places there. So I'm not going to waste any materials, because you know me, I'm tight as hell and I never chuck anything away. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to go around with the felt tip around my point. So make this as wide as you want. I want it to be fairly imposing. I want it to be a fairly elongated arrow, because a dumpy one doesn't look so scary. I know it sounds stupid, but the pointier and the more sharp it looks a bit more menacing. Okay, so that's what I'll do. You can always make it a bit more pointy, so it's really sharp, but I'm also thinking bits are possibly going to break off. So I'll go around with the pen now, mark up and cut out. So as you can see, this stuff's really quite easy to cut. I didn't go too close to the edge, because I thought if I did waver a little bit with the tip of the blade, I might cut over my line. So I've gone a little bit inside the line so I can sand it back. And like I said, this stuff is real easy to cut, so I'll just demonstrate. I'm using the actual board itself as a cutting mat, but if you have your own cutting mat, that's brilliant. So you can see how easy this stuff is to cut. So I cut off a slice like that, not an issue. So, you know, it's quite brittle, it's quite breakable, but it's got possibly a bit of flex to it. So I'm going to worry too much that it's going to snap off like polystyrene. If you've gone too close to something like this, it's a bit flimsy, it might break off. But don't worry if this does break. You can always add to a cocktail stick, some PVA glue or something. I'm not going to keep any of these cut-offs here. Maybe I will, because you know me, like I said, I don't like to chuck anything away. I think I might just put it on the base to bulk up the base a little bit, because if you use actual rocks, after a while it does become a little bit heavy. So I'm just going to cut out the basic shape initially. Get a cheapy knife. Always get an adult to help you if you're not sure. I wish I had an adult to help me. Yeah, just keep trimming away. Just be a bit careful. I mean, I could always cut around that and then I can shape it and stick it to it with a cocktail stick later on if I'm worried it's going to break off. Okay, so what I'll do now is I'll get some harsher sandpaper, start tidying this up, get as close to that line as possible, and you'll notice a lot of fine dust coming off. Now you don't want that stuff anywhere near your lungs, so well ventilated area or wear a mask is ideal. And then later on I'll use some finer sandpaper just to smooth it up a little bit. But you can see where I've cut with a knife and I've twisted the knife and it's left a bit of a odd effect there. That's great for cliff faces, so that you understand why people use this for dioramas or model trains, things like that, because this stuff is a lot better than polystyrene really. It's the same weight, it's just a lot easier to work with, so easy to sand like that. And you don't get those stupid little plastic staticky balls everywhere. So I'll carry on and get as close to that line as possible. And however you've made your circle before, be it a compass or drawing around a plate as I have, don't chuck anything away. So the centre bit here, I'd imagine it's kind of leaning back a little bit, the old Chaos Gate. Now I want to continue this over to there. So I want a bit of a V, so I'm going to destroy a bit of that later on. Like that's been blown apart. I'm going to put some possible rebars and things in there as well. So for that, I'll probably use paper clips or a bit thicker wire. But that's what I imagine, leaning back a little bit, been blown to bits. So I will keep that, I'll cut that out, and I'll keep this bit here as well, because I will need to make a couple more of these. Now remember, these have to be every so many inches. So it's got to be north, south, east and west. So if you imagine if that's north, and that would be east, and then we have one slap bang in the middle. So that's how I made it like that. So this bit here will probably be covered up by some rubble anyway. This bit here would have been possibly blown apart. So then there'll be another one over here which we'll barely see as well. So that one there, I could always do half a point and stick it on there. And then that one there possibly will be buried as well. But we will see. We will see how much I will bury it and how much I will destroy it. So I'll cut this little section out, keeping that piece, and then we'll start gluing it to the base. Okay, so there's all the basic shapes cut out. What I'm going to do now is attach these with cocktail sticks. So these are going to be busted anyway, they're going to be broken up, but at the moment I want them roughly in place, so it gives me some kind of guideline of where I'm sticking this thing to. Of course, half of that's going to be covered up by rubble anyway, and that's all going to be blown apart and broken up. So I'll attach them with cocktail sticks, just cocktail stick, cut in half, and I'll put a couple in on each bit. A bit of PVA glue. Don't worry, the PVA glue, make sure it will go off fully hard. Be about 24 hours though. You don't particularly want to use super glue, because super glue still may react. I mean, if it is polystyrene, super glue will melt it completely, whereas this stuff has a slight reaction with super glue, not massive. But PVA glue is slightly thicker, so it'll fill up any gaps that you may have. So I'll do that in a minute, and then I'll start gluing it to the base. So once your main piece is glued down, like I said before, I will ruin that area, I will smash it up a bit. But start filling in the gaps around here. Plus, when it dries, it would really strengthen the bond between this piece and the base. So you can use hot glue gun, that's totally fine, that's totally safe, it's not going to melt it. It'll bond to it in seconds, not a problem. And then I'm going to start adding bits around here, start gluing. So, like I said, don't leave anything to waste. So these chunks I've put down there from the original centerpiece that I cut out. I also like this, so do a bit of cosplaying. Got a bit of this EVA foam, which is great. Just cut bits off of it, chunks, willy-nilly, with a knife, nice sharp knife, and literally just cut bits off, tear it, whatever you want to do. It looks like rocks. That's great. It's only the basic shapes we're doing at the moment, because later on we will cover it in something and give it more of a rocky texture, but just want the basic shapes. So cover up any of the gaps, any of the bits that you don't want to be seen. So I'm going to put some rocks and stuff around there like that, because I don't want that nasty gap showing. You could always use a bit of cork, a bit of filler or something if you would rather just fill it in like that. But I really want this thing to be thousands of years old, just buried in the hillside, you know. So I'll get big chunks of that. I mean, that should be fairly well stuck. I can pick it up like that anyway. It's fairly strong. So bits like that I've had from the center, I've stuck on. Now it does react with super glue. It will bubble and go a bit like that. Oop, a bit gunky. Yeah, stick your finger in it. That's great. Stick your finger in super glue. So it's really not the best stuff to be super gluing down. I did say sometimes they do react a little bit, and case in point, yellow stuff does react with super glue. So big old chunks like that, just put in place. That will super glue in, that's not a problem. Or if you haven't got any super glue, PVA is fine. PVA is safe, it will not melt anything that I'm aware of. But it does take a bit longer to go off, so I just put a few little dabs of super glue in there like that. Let that soak in. And this is just the basic shapes before we start adding bigger rocks and things like that. So for fairly big rocks, really cheap, cat litter, sure. Make sure it's not used cat litter, so there's no nasty nuggets in there. Like I said, bigger rocks, again, these are actual stones though, so they might be a bit heavier. But this is donated from a friend, Marcus, my mate. Fish tank gravel, why not? Big bag of that. He had a big bag. It was going on sale, so great for larger rocks. And then we'll eventually put PVA glue over the whole thing, and we'll start flocking and things like that. Okay, so have a bit of fun with this. Try not to leave anything too flat. It's nice to put miniatures on, but you do want a bit of texture. You don't just want to put flock on that, because it'd be quite obvious that's flat ground, unless you want to stick the occasional tile down or something and then put flock around it to make it look like this was part of a temple or something before it was destroyed. Then that's totally fine, because ground is out in the wild. It's very rare that it's completely flat. You know, I mean, look around you. You might see a field that's been, you know, rolled flat, but in, you know, real wild wastelands, it's very rare that you're going to get any flat area. So yeah, just make it nice and rough and bumpy. Go as far as you like. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to start cutting some big chunks up, sticking around. I'm going to make the ground a bit bumpier before we get to the next stage. And remember, with PVA glue, it's always nice to leave it 24 hours before brushing it, anything like that. Okay, so it's been roughly 24 hours since I put the PVA glue down with various different grades of sands. So I've got some thicker stuff there, some finer stuff there. That's like the chinchilla sand. Massive bag for £1, ultra fine, brilliant stuff. And then you'll notice a few places I haven't covered. And what I want to do with that is use this particular product. So completely optional, but I love this product. When it dries, it really does give a nice rocky texture. And the heat on the back of this piece here that I'm going to make look like a rock. I'm going to put that on, and I'm going to put on a few bare places as well, just to give it some texture. So make sure, because this is quite gritty, this product, that you use an old brush. So I'm going to have, you can see I've used a lot of this tub already, but that tub has done so much work, and it was only £10. Sounds like a lot, but when you think GW have a very similar product, and theirs is like £4 a tub, and it's was it like 25 grams or something, maybe a bit more, maybe 50 grams, and then you look at this, and this is 250, not grams, milliliters. Yeah, grams, that'd be great, wouldn't it? So yeah, there's a bit of a difference. So it's like twice the price for like 10 times the product. So I'm just going to slap some of this on. You can see some of the hot glue still showing there, so I really want to bury this hot glue in there. I'm going to put loads of this stuff on. Relatively quick drying time, so well, it obviously depends how thick it is, but this stuff will definitely be dry in a few hours time. Obviously put it on really thick, you might want to leave it overnight. So I'm just going to squidge it in there, maybe a bit higher. Really want to make it look like this thing's been buried. It's been in this kind of state for the last like 1,000 years or something. So just slab a load on there. And there's a bit of a crack there showing, so I'll put a bit in there as well. And then I'll put a load on the heap at the back to make it look like rocks. I have done a product review on this stuff before. They do different colours, different variants. They do a desert style one, which is a bit smoother. Do an asphalt one, they do a concrete one, a rocky one. Once it goes off, it's super easy to dry brush or paint. Just put a little bit on there as well. And once this is gone off, so I'm going to wait a few hours. I'm then going to put PVA glue on everything, just to make sure it's super gone off, super hard, less likely to chip or sand fall off, because if you brush that hard enough I can probably knock that sand off. But you can see there I put down some plastic card rather than cardboard. I used plastic card because I didn't want it to warp. I mean, you might be okay with card, stick it down with super glue or PVA glue and it might not warp, but I didn't want to take the risk. And as I have loads and loads of sheets of plastic card anyway, A4 sheets are like £1 or a couple quid, depends where you shop to. I mean, obviously you can keep the cost down and just use cardboard, it's not a problem, but I just didn't want it to warp as soon as I come this far with it. Put a bit more on there, make it look a bit more rocky, a bit more natural, and fill in any gaps where there might be any hot wire or cracks showing. See some sand's dropping off there, hence that's why later on I'm going to be using some PVA to coat everything. Now while this is drying, what I'm going to do is chip the ring itself, the Chaos Gate itself up. So I'll just put some of that down, make it look a bit more realistic. Loads and loads of different textures, so later on when we paint it up, it'll look a bit more natural. Like so. I'll wash that brush thoroughly, even though it's an old brush. It's quite gritty, this stuff, and when it goes off hard, it will kill a brush. So, what I'm going to do now is, you can see I've started attacking this piece here. Get a nice sharp knife. So, same knife as earlier before. Probably don't need to extend the blades too far. I lop my fingers off. So I'm imagining this area has been blasted and it's kind of cracked down in a roughly V-shaped kind of pattern. So I'm going to do that and just start busting some bits off. So My lovely handiwork there with doing the corner. Yeah, that looks great and everything, but I need to destroy it. So I'm going to cut in slightly and just twist the blade. So it looks like it's blasted apart there. Cut in slightly and just twist the blade until I get a roughly kind of blast area. So I'm imagining a rocket or something's hit there. So I'm going to do a bit like that. Blast a bit off. Blast a bit off. So most of the damage is this section through the back there. I'm not going to do too much. I'm just going to crack a little bit off that. So, and this stuff's great. This is why I didn't use polystyrene, because you can't do this with polystyrene. Just those tiny little balls will go everywhere. I don't have a name for those balls. It just sounds terrible when I say tiny balls go everywhere. So that's why I'm imagining like this, being blasted apart, and just get as rough as you want with it. It has to be too pretty. I can't imagine it's going to be very neat when a rocket or a missile hits this area, blowing it apart. And I could always, like I said previously, put some reed bars in there. So I might just stick some paper clips or something in there to make it look like this was reinforced concrete over the last like 10 millennia or something that's been blasted apart and blown apart. I'm just going to destroy some of my nice handiwork there. And just do a little bit on the inside edge because I don't want it to look too smooth, too perfect in there. So go as mad as you want with it. There we go. Just get rid of any straggly pieces. Like that. I'm going to do the same on both faces as well, so it's fairly obvious this isn't just a clean cut like someone's made with a knife. So make the surfaces inside look pitted, scored, and once I painted it I also will probably airbrush a very dark colour there to show it's been blasted. So after you messed around with that, we'll wait a little bit for this stuff to go off, and if you haven't used this stuff, not a problem. Just use finer sand or something like that, not a problem. Wait until it's fully gone off, use a decent coat of PVA glue with a little bit of water on everything just so it seals it in before we start painting. So what I've done is cut, I don't know if you can see this, a couple bits of wire, made some reed bars, strengthening this, I presume, concrete chaos gate. Next what I was going to do is just a few little bits of detail. You don't have to do this. Found an old costume bit of jewellery, really cheap. I'm going to cut it in half and just attach it to here. I'm thinking like panel pins. For those who do any woodwork or DIY, you might have these lying around home. And just stick it through the chain, purely because it's quite a big head and it looks almost like they've been nailed in. So I'm going to cut this chain in half, and going to put a nail or two in it as well. So let's see how that goes. So what I've done is attached a tiny skull to the end of the chain, and I've put one of these panel pins just in there. I'm just going to skewer it randomly in the terrain like so, obviously making sure the panel pin isn't wider, or sorry, longer than the thickness of the chaos gate itself. I've done another one here. I folded the chain over a little bit as well. Stabbing that one in. Now you don't have to do that, I just thought it was a bit of extra. There we go. That shouldn't go anywhere. Right, next thing is to add as many skulls as you like. Now, I'm going to go nuts with this, and I'm using some of these demon skulls and human skulls, all from the Citadel Skulls box. There's loads and loads, as you can imagine, judging by the artwork on the front of the box. And if you haven't seen my previous video already about me unboxing this, I think it's wicked. I've used this also on my skull throne, so I've done a video on how to make a skull throne as well. And what's a skull throne without skulls? A throne. Yeah, so I needed a load of skulls, so why not get this kit? Fantastic kit. Kroot skulls, demon skulls, Tau skulls, Tyrannid skulls, Orc skulls, human skulls, what's not to like? So I'm going to go nuts with some skulls, put them all around the base of this terrain, and then start priming it up. Now you have to remember, alright, it's not polystyrene, but it's still a foam, it's still extruded foam. So it probably will react with a rattle can. Whatever rattle can you're going to use, there's a good chance it probably will react. So I will use airbrush primer just for the sake of ease, purely because it's just easy to lay this stuff down, and it takes a minute and it's a good coverage. So that's what I'll do. I'll put down a load of skulls, prime it all up, and we'll come back to the main painting section. Okay, so after you laid down some primer and it's gone off fully, I'm thinking paint the lower levels first. So I'm going to start with the tiles. Going to have a bit of contrast. So the piece is going to be quite dark, apart from the green tufts of grass and the tiles. So I'm going to start off laying this kind of colour down on the tiles. The compressor kicking in. That's a very vibrant colour, and I will weather that later on to make it look less vibrant, but I'm going to start off with quite a bright colour. Although it's been primed, the plastic card should only need one coat paint, but be aware you might need two if it's dark plastic card, painting over the top of it. I'm going to start mixing up my soil colours and working my way around the tiled areas up to the Chaos Gate itself. Once all the base colours are down, so with my browns on terrain I like to drop a little bit of purple in it, just so it gives it a slightly different kind of brown. So burnt umber with a little bit of purple to it. Looks slightly more weird and sci-fi. Not massively, just a hint, but you know, push it as far as you're comfortable with. Next thing, I will dry brush everything. So I will dry brush the terrain, and then the actual Chaos Gate itself, I'll probably edge highlight just to make it pop a little bit more. I'm pretty happy with the tiles there. So overall, the tiles were quite dirty, and then I just hit a little bit of the turquoise in the center of each. But yeah, so all the browns are going to be dry brushed, and I'm going to probably edge highlight the Chaos Gate itself, and then I'll paint the chains and make them really, really dirty, and pick out the skulls and put a nice dirty wash over them. So that's the next port of call. So I'll get a nice dry brush. So I'm mixing up a fairly lightish brown initially. For a heavy dry brush to start with. So good old big brush, don't have to worry about any nice Kalinsky sable brushes or anything like that, because you'll just destroy them on this stuff, because after all it is sand, and sand is gritty. So a fairly heavy dry brush initially. Possibly a little lighter, and then I'll go, once that's all dry, lighter again. And don't make it too uniform, don't do it all the same, dry brush all over, and an interesting colour every now and again to a different area, just to keep it a bit more natural, you know. The ground isn't exactly the same colour everywhere you look, is it? So Later on I'll add some pigments as well, just to mix it up a little bit. But yeah, I'll keep adding to this, and I'll do the edge highlights on the gate itself. Okay, so I've put a little bit of orange on anything that was steel, just a little hint of rust. A little bit of detail there, just a bloody handprint. Why not? You know, this is a Chaos Gate after all, why not? And I've put 2 coats of white on each of the skulls. So how I do my skulls, quick and easy skulls for terrain. I like to make them a little bit dirty, slightly beyond bleach bone. So 2 coats of white, followed by an Agrax, and when it dries, it looks pretty dirty. It looks like the skulls have been there for a while. So I do this kind of thing on terrain. I don't do it on miniatures necessarily, unless I think the skulls have been there for a long time. And obviously on a miniature, I'd probably highlight it up. But for these, I'm just going to put on lots and lots of Agrax. Really dirty. These skulls have been here for a long time. And when this is drying, I'm actually going to get a selection of grass tufts. This particular time I am going to use some Citadel grass tufts, but there's loads of great companies out there that make them. I do quite like proper sci-fi grass tufts, like fluorescent pinks and purples, things like that. May look a bit crazy, but it really makes your terrain pop. Especially if you're doing a bit of 40k, you know, you don't really know what colour grass is going to be on it. Any sci-fi planet, it's unlikely it's going to be green. But that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to put on any areas I'm not happy with first, to hide any mistakes. And then sprout on out through chunks of rock and things like that. Okay, so I'll carry on with this for a bit. I think the main thing is not to make it look too uniform. So I've used a little bit of the old grass tufts from Citadel. They do have some random shapes on it, and I don't generally use the big pieces. The big crazy, I say big, miniature wise, that's quite large. If you're putting that on a 25mm base, that's going to take up quite a lot of the base. So I put quite a few of these coming out of the cracks, underneath rocks, underneath the gate itself, in the cracks of the actual tiles. So there's one growing up through the middle, and I've used a few different colour greys as well on the rocks. Don't know how well this is showing up, but not all rocks are the same colours. So that was Ministratum grey, and I've used some Codex grey on some of the rocks. I've got some slightly greeny rocks as well, not that it really shows up, and a few purpley rocks, because like I said, not all rocks are the same. I've also put an Agrax wash on the orange to calm it down. And what I'm going to use next is some pigments. So all these things are optional. If you've got them lying around, brilliant. And I do thoroughly recommend Mig Ammo's modelling pigment. So I'm using some Vietnam Earth. There's some other great colours that they do. I think this is quite striking. So just be aware this stuff stains quite well. So you can see I'm putting a little bit into the lid, and then I'm applying and working in. Because if you drop this on your lap, believe me, it will stain your best jeans. So just be a bit careful with this stuff. You think, oh, it's just a powder, it's just landed on my jeans, not a problem. Yeah, it really does stain. But that's the idea of this stuff. It stains. So it just adds a little bit of texture. Using a few different mediums really does bring it out. With the grass tufts, the dry brush stone, and a few bits of pigment, already is looking a bit more realistic. And as you can see, the skulls didn't turn out too badly. So it's just a quick technique. Obviously it's not the best. You want to spend a bit of time on your terrain. Brilliant. And make those skulls really pop. But me personally, I'm just going to make it look a bit earthy, a bit dirty. No one spent time polishing them. There you go. I will blow off the excess, I think. I'll put a little bit more underneath here. And underneath. Where the wind might have blown the stuff. There. So I'm reasonably happy with this. Didn't take me very long. Once again, household materials, people. So really didn't cost me anything hardly at all. The wooden board I had lying around, but you can get them pretty much anywhere. Builders, merchants, places like that. Even packing material sometimes comes with plyboard, or you could just use thick cardboard, which obviously costs pence, or as part of packaging anyway. Like I said, you could use polystyrene, not a problem. This stuff I think is a lot better because you can sand it and you can work with it a lot easier and cut it. In fact, I'm going to stop right there already because I always change my mind. I think that blast area looks a bit too clean, so I have painted the dark sections and I've painted the light sections, like the edge highlights. But I'm going to quickly get the airbrush and give it a quick spray, a dusting of probably black. Good old indecisive Ross. Yep, so a little bit of black. Just a tiny bit. Not a lot at all. What I'm going to do is just dust this from a distance. There, I just thought it looked a little bit too clean. Now it definitely looks a bit more like a rocket launcher's hit it. And draws the eye a bit more, I think. I mean, you could always walk that down just a little bit there, just so you can see a bit more of the rust shining through. Just slightly wet brush. And once that's dried, I probably will dry brush the rust a little bit more just to make it pop and shine through again. So the rust is probably exaggerated, possibly a bit too much, but I really like it popping. Sometimes it goes a little bit beyond realism for it to be more eye-catching. So I would imagine in this vast wasteland, those turquoise tiles aren't going to be that clean, but I just like the contrast of the dirty and the bright. Maybe the marble and the wind's blown off the dust. But if it was all brownish colour, it wouldn't look quite so fun now, would it? Right. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video as much as I have creating this piece. And hopefully you'll see it on a few battle reports soon for some 40k. I was quite tempted to actually make a Noctith crown when I first started out. So my own version. I really do like the piece of terrain by GW, but I just always wanted to make a broken ruin chaos gate. So there you go, there you have it. Thank you for watching. Please hit that like button below, and if you haven't done already, please subscribe. Hobby safe, guys, and hopefully see you in the next video.